Welcome to the Relationship Series podcast. My name is Ankush Jain, and each episode I'll be speaking to a different state of mind expert on the subject of relationships. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 34 of the Relationship Series. This episode, I've got a very special guest with me. It's Linda Pransky. We've pretty much interviewed, I think, everyone in her family so far, so we had to get Linda on our show also. For those of you who don't know Linda, she's been a student around these principles behind state of mind since 1976, and so has been teaching them for a number of years. She's also the co-founder of Pranskey and Associates, and now primarily works with other practitioners, other people who are state of mind experts, to help them teach from this understanding. So welcome to the show, Linda.
Thank you. Nice introduction.
It's such a pleasure to have you on the show. And what's really been great is, whilst we've interviewed your husband and both your daughters, everyone in the family's bringing their own view to things and their own way of describing this understanding. So I'm really looking forward to your explanation and how you describe your journey, especially since we've had other people in your family describe theirs. It's great to get different points of view there. So I thought maybe we'd just start off with a little bit about your story. So for people who don't know you, who's Linda Pransky and how did you get to being a pioneer, if you like, in this field, or someone who's very, very well known and respected?
Well, years ago, George and I worked together with a man named John Enright, and we did it wasn't traditional counseling or therapy. Now it looks like traditional counseling and therapy, but back then in the mid-'70s, it was cutting edge. It was around the time of Est and LifeSpring, and people were all about techniques and processes and coming up with new ones. And so we were, happily doing our techniques and processes with our clients when we stumbled across Sydney Banks, went to one of his lectures. The interesting thing was that we could see that he was affecting people, affecting the audience, but we couldn't see the technique. So we were looking for it. We were interviewing people that had been listening to him, and all they would say is, "Look, we just listen. We just listen and we change." Now, we were very skeptical of that, of people saying, "Well, we just listen and we change." So we went away. We went back home. We were in Canada, Sid lived in Canada at that time. We went back home, and we sent a friend of ours up, Roger Mills, colleague and a friend. And I saw him, 3-6 months later, and he was different. And I asked him about it. And he said that he had gone up to listen to Sid, and in fact, he'd gotten affected. And it was about the listening. It wasn't about technique. It wasn't about process. It essentially was listening to someone who was in a better state of mind than you were.
And for people who don't know anything about what we're talking about, who was Sydney Banks and why did you go up there and speak to this or meet this guy?
Well, John Enright was always looking for new ways of working with people, and a friend of his and colleague was very excited about Sid because of the fact that people seemed to be getting help without a technique, by just listening. So John was really interested, so he went to have a look, and he couldn't figure Sid out. So that's why he brought George and I up to figure Sid out. And that's why we sent Roger up. And essentially, Roger, he didn't figure Sid out, but he learned from Sid through listening. Because the idea is if you listen to someone in a really good state of mind or a high level of consciousness, and you're open, you get affected by them. So George and I decided to go back up and listen to Sid after we saw the change in Roger, and we decided, well, we'll just listen the best we can. We won't try to figure out what he's doing. We'll just listen to the best we can, and we'll see if we get affected. Well, at some point, it took a while for me to understand how to listen, because normally I would listen through analyzing and applying and comparing and criticizing, disagreeing. In my mind, while I'm listening to a lecture, I would be analyzing. Well, Roger told me, don't do that, just listen, which was another concept, another way of listening. It was something that was very foreign to me. It was like listening with an empty mind in a way, or listening with nothing on your mind. It took me a while to do that, to learn that. And once I did, I started hearing things. I started having insights. And I realized that that's what would happen to people. That was the active ingredient. When you listen to Sid, you'd have insight, you'd have new thought. And the new thought would be extremely helpful and literally designed for you. Like, for example, the first insight I had listening to Sid was that mood was thought. And at the time, I had trouble with moods. I was afraid of my moods. So I'd mentally run from them or try not to have them, or I could feel them coming and I get very anxious about dropping into a mood. But I didn't understand it as thought. And once I understood it as thought, it took away my fear. Because I realized, well, if it's just thought and it's me and it'll come and go, even though I don't like it and I don't like being in a low mood, it's really nothing to be frightened of. That's how I understood it after I had my insight. It's extremely helpful. The other insight that I had that was extremely helpful to my relationship, given that this is a podcast on relationship, was that I asked Sid at one point, I said, I don't understand how relationships seem to start out good for everyone. It's like everyone meets someone, they're very happy, they fall in love, and then things go south. They start to not like each other so much, or they start to argue or bicker or be at odds. And I said, that's what's happened with George and I. It's like we started out great, and now we argue all the time, it seems. It's just no fun anymore. And I said that to Sid. And essentially he said to me, look, if you want to have a good relationship, you have to enjoy the other person. Like when you first started dating, you enjoyed the other person. Then you switched. You went from enjoying them to not enjoying them so much. Now, when he said that, I thought about it and I realized that it was true. I realized I had an insight. I realized that I could actually remember the moment when I had felt so good about George, so good about him. And I remember one moment, it's like I went from just feeling good about him all the time to looking at him through critical eyes. Now, I didn't realize that I had done that until Sid told me what he did, told me about how people go from the feeling of enjoyment to the feeling of not enjoying so much. And I didn't realize that I had done that. And then I had another insight. I thought, whoa, I can't constantly look at him through the eyes of enjoyment. That just doesn't, I'm not static. That's just one experience, looking at someone through the eyes of enjoyment. I can't constantly be like that. But I realized I could be a lot more that way and less looking through the eyes of criticism. I realized I could be in more of a balance so that my relationship had more of the feeling of enjoyment. Well, that insight turned our relationship around for me, because I gave as much valence to what was wonderful about George. See, I'd stopped thinking about what was wonderful about him. I was just thinking about what wasn't, rather than about what was. And when I started doing more of that, enjoying our being with him, our relationship turned around. And then essentially, our first career in teaching the principles of thought, consciousness, and mind, which people talk about, refer to as state of mind. We started our total population of clients were people on the verge of divorce. That's who we worked with. And because, see, we'd been there, we were on the verge of divorce. So, and we flipped our relationship from bad to good. So it's like we'd been there, done that. So it was really easy working with people that were on the verge of divorce, because we just had to help them see how to put more valence or more positivity in their relationship that was legitimate. Because they'd just gotten sidetracked and were just thinking what was wrong too much. See?
And for anyone that doesn't know too much about Sydney Banks, whatever, you guys said you were working with John Enright, very well respected. So was Sydney Banks someone who's very well educated? Was there something special about him?
Well, no, he was not. He was a welder, and essentially had an epiphany where he realized that people's problems, like, for example, their relationship problems, were how they saw and felt and thought about their partner. And that how you thought was reflected in your feeling and in your behavior. Now, when people when I talk this way, people think, oh, that's cognitive therapy, all right? But it's not. Because on one level, you can try to be positive, but it doesn't have any legs. It doesn't have any real depth to it. And it's work. Like, you work at it, you try to be it. It's like you slap it over your deeper negative feeling. Like, I tried to do that. I'd feel negative and I'd try to talk myself into being positive and then behave positive. But it looked insincere and it felt insincere. But when you truly see from a level of insight, like you have a change in your level of understanding, you have a change in your level of consciousness, so that you truly see. See, looking to enjoy George was not an idea. It didn't come from an idea. It didn't come from my intellect. It came from a realization. It came from a deeper place in me. It came from an insight. And when something comes from an insight, and everybody understands this because everyone's had insights, when you get insightful thought, it has meat, it has depth, and it automatically plays itself out in your life. Like it automatically turned my mind in a different direction. I didn't have to work at it. I saw a different reality. In fact, that's what Sid saw when he had his epiphany. He saw that our personal reality is made up of our thought and consciousness. So whatever we think, we become conscious of. And that consciousness and thought has a feeling that's connected to our sensory system. So we feel our thinking. And sometimes our thinking can be really strong. Our feeling can be very strong. So that we think, oh, if I have a really strong feeling, I should act on it. Like, for example, in relationships, I used to think if I got really mad at George, it had a lot of meaning, and it meant I should communicate. Well, now I do the opposite. When I have a really strong feeling of being really angry at George, I know that's not the time to communicate because it's just going to end up in an argument. So I let the feeling of anger pass, and if there's something I need to communicate that's left, I communicate from a neutral mind. Isn't that a beautiful thing to communicate from a neutral mind? It saves so much wear and tear on your relationship.
Yeah, that's really interesting how it's the total opposite of what you were doing before.
It was the total opposite. Because we were teaching people to express their negative emotions, express their dissatisfactions, express what they disliked, and express what they thought was wrong. So guess what? If you're doing all of that, you're creating a negative relationship. It's not like you ever get anywhere doing that ultimately. You just turns your relationship sour. And that's what happened to George and I. Our relationship turned sour from communicating all that negativity and from all the time we spent at odds. Because see, if I'm in an angry state of mind, it's not a stable state. And I'll say things that I don't mean, which will ignite him and pull him in. He says things he doesn't mean. And we get each other very reactive. And then you can just be talking from a reactive state for hours until you get exhausted. And that's what we did. So now we let our emotions pass. It's not like we hide them or deny them. We just let our emotions pass by not thinking into them. But see, that was an insight. It's all insight. Look, because I realized that thinking into my emotions would make them bigger and more intense. If I didn't think into my emotions, they would just unwind and go away. And then I could talk to George about whatever I needed to talk to him about. A parenting issue that I was angry about. Once I got settled down, I could just say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about the kids. Instead of coming from an angry state of mind, coming from a neutral state of mind. But see, it was an insight that I never thought that I could just let my emotions pass. I thought I had to make meaning of them and express them. But I made that up. See, I made it up.
You know, it's interesting me. So something that I heard, and I don't know if this is true, but something that I heard is that the vast majority of relationship experts in the West, at least, tend to have been divorced or divorced several times, often from each other. I don't know if that's true, but what's really interesting listening to you is that a lot of what you're teaching is coming from your own personal experience of having a great relationship.
All of what I teach, everything I teach, comes from my personal experience. It comes from my insight learning. And it's not that I'm trying to teach my insights. I'm pointing people in the direction of their own insights about their own relationship. Now, teaching my insights is helpful, but it's more hopeful than anything else. Look, all you have to do is stop looking in what you already know, which is your intellect, and look in a different direction for insight about your relationship, and you can have it. You can have insights about your own relationship.
And again, something that I've heard, and you'd know better than I do, that you guys had some incredible success with couples that was completely out of the normal. Something like, 80% of couples that came to you were transformed compared to 20% in traditional therapy.
Yeah, because see, people, it's all thought, but people don't realize, because thought can feel very concrete, and thought, beliefs about relationships, and people get very committed to the way they think, and they just need to change their mind. And you can change your mind. Like one of the things little things, like one of the things that I changed my mind about, I didn't realize that before we met Sid, every time we had an argument that would be heated, which I'll call a fight, not a physical fight. We never fought physically, we just fight emotionally. Whenever we had one of those, I would count it as evidence against our being together. It was very psychologically undermining to me to do that. After I met Sid and I started learning, having insight, I realized that was arbitrary. I didn't have to do that. I made it up. I don't know where or how, whether I learned it from someone, I don't remember. I just remembered I kept counting. I keep track. And I thought, X amount, we're going to have to split. I made it up. But see, I believed in it. I changed my mind. Now, the other thing that I mentioned to you that I changed my mind about was I changed my mind about communicating when I was upset, because I realized it was very inefficient and hard, and it wore me out. And I realized I didn't have to. But that was a change of mind because I thought I had to. Well, no. It was a belief I had that I took on. So as I started learning from Sid, I started taking off beliefs, old ones. And that's what we taught couples. You don't have to think that way about the other person. It's not required. You made it up, or you learned it and you took it on, like you would put on a jacket, or you would put on a sweater. It's like a mental sweater or a mental jacket. You can take it off. You don't have to have it. And it's just, but see, when people understand that thought creates their reality, and it's just energy and form, it's a mental energy and form, and you can let it pass, and you can take on a better thought that's more workable in your relationship. It will make it more successful.
So I was talking to a client today, and he was having some struggle in his relationship, and he was saying, well, I understand what you're saying. It's all thought, it's all thinking, but when my partner, when she says this, she's really undermining me, and that's making me feel upset. And I would love to hear your explanation of what you would say to him.
Well, see, his thought, she's undermining me, is a thought and a reality to him. See, it's a reality. It's a thought that he's made into a reality. Because no one can ultimately be undermined unless they think it. And see, how I realized this is that there would be someone who would listen to her and not feel undermined, and she'd do the same thing. He might feel something else, but not necessarily feel undermined. He wouldn't take it that way. Like he might take it as, wow, she's in a really bad state of mind. Or she's really upset. Or she's really trying to hurt me because she feels so hurt. So there's so many ways to see it. So even though he sees it the way he sees it, the only reason it hurts him is because he believes in it. He thinks it's true, as opposed to just a thought he's having about her. See? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, combined with what you said earlier about for yourself and your own relationship about keeping score, I can just imagine just how helpful that could be to people listening in relationships, that no matter what someone's done before, no matter how you view them, being aware that that's all coming to you via thought kind of gives you a constant fresh page, a fresh chapter, constantly looking, without any of that baggage that you have in a relationship.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true, because the other thing I had to learn is to let go of the past. And what was so exciting is when I realized that if we had an argument, like there's no perfection here. George and I still have arguments. It's just, instead of 90% of the time, it's like 10. But when we have an argument, it's like, it's very short-lived. And when it's gone, it's gone. It's gone. It's like it never happened. And I love that. It's like once it's gone, we just forget about it. So that then as soon as it's gone, it's like, hey, would you like a cup of tea? There's no residue, because it's now the past. And that's what George and I had to learn, is we had to learn to forgive and forget the past of our relationship. And the past is just thought brought into the moment. So you're in the moment, you're feeling fine, and all of a sudden the past comes in, what he did to you or what she did to you, and you start thinking about it and you build this bad feeling, and then you go to them and say, remember when you did this to me? Well, no.
Right, 1st of December 1986, when you left the toilet seat up, I still remember that, right?
You don't have to do it. In other words, when the past comes in, if you wake up and you go, oh, gee, the past is coming in and bringing me down. It's just the past. It's nothing more than, the past is dead. It's gone. It's only alive if it's dragged up into our conscious mind that's in the present. We drag it in. See, it's just, it's gone. You can't fix the past by thinking about it. You can't make the past different by thinking about it. You just forget about it because it's gone.
So why would you say that it's so compelling to people? It's so compelling, their thinking in the past and making things real for themselves to the point that they sabotage what is otherwise a beautiful relationship.
Well, they get hurt and they haven't gotten over it. The hurt. See? And the other thing is just so interesting. Such little thoughts. See, I had the thought that I couldn't get over hurt. Now that was a really powerful thought for me. I can't get over being hurt. Well, I absolutely can get over being hurt. But that little thought was in my way. But see, the reason thoughts have so much power is because people believe in them. They think it's true. I'm a person who can't get over being hurt. That's true. It's done deal. That's the truth. I can't get over being hurt. Well, no, it's just, I can. Once I realized that was my thinking was that way, that belief about I can't get over hurt was just a way of thinking. It wasn't the truth. It's not gravity. just a way of thinking that was holding me prisoner. It was holding me in the torture of my hurtful mind. See? And then I realized I can get over it. I don't have to think about it. So that's how you get over it, is to stop thinking about it. You know, somebody said, George would say, I get my feelings. Oh, and then I just have hurt feelings and I get over it. I mean, it's really kind of funny, really. But this is what we would teach people. Our couples, we'd say, look, what's happening? We'd find out how they would get in each other's grill, so to speak. And we'd say, it's thought. You're thinking seriously about him, or you're thinking seriously about her. And we give all kinds of examples from our own relationship until it would get through the intellect. You want to bypass the intellect to a deeper place in people. I don't know what to call it, the place of insight, where people wake up and they go, oh yeah, that's not a good way to think. I don't understand why I've been doing that. That makes no sense. This is what they'd say. Makes no sense that I wouldn't forgive her for that. I've been holding that against her. Why would I hold that against her? See, they have an insight and their minds change. It's very beautiful work to watch relationships heal through seeing the so-called reality as thought. See, that's what we learned from Sid, is our personal reality that we held so dear was just made up of thought. And that thought could change, but only via insight, not willpower, insight.
So I guess the next question is, if someone's listening to this and they want insight about their relationship, what do they do?
Get hold of Sydney Banks' recordings and listen to them. And listen to him like you would listen to music. Listen to him for a feeling. Because don't try to understand his words. Because I would try to understand his words. And sometimes I'd be like, what's he saying? But what you want to do is listen and pick up on a feeling. And that feeling will change your level. And at a level of consciousness change, you will have insight. It's that simple. But, you know, here's the thing, what I realized about people, me included, people don't like simplicity. The intellect likes complexity. And that's the problem. People like complexity. They don't like simplicity. A simple insight is profound. And it can be so simple. Like my insight, I don't have to think of myself as a person who can't get over being hurt. It's so simple. But it profoundly changed my experience of having the experience of hurt feeling. And it helped my relationship, because I'd have a hurt feeling and I'd go after George. Blame him. And I realized it's in me and it's my place to get over that state of mind of hurt. And I'm the only one that's going to do it. And if I don't think into it and I understand that I can get over on it, it's just a matter of time. And then it dissolves, because your experience will pass if you leave it. If you leave it, your experience will pass. It's like and I realize that all experience is meant to come and go. Your experiences come and go if you leave them alone, if you don't think into them or make a big meaning out of them. Because see, like, I used to make a lot of meaning out of having the experience of hurt feeling. A lot of meaning. It meant George was a bad person. It meant that I was overly sensitive. It meant all kinds of things. And that's thought too. See, in that, I went, I don't have to think that way. I don't think it means anything. And then because I didn't put a lot of thinking into my experience, it would pass quickly. So simple. So it was very, very fun. And we worked with couples probably about 20 years, pretty exclusively, just one couple after another that were really struggling. It was beautiful, to see them heal their relationship, like I said. What else do you want to know?
Yeah, one thing I'm really curious to know is that, was this just like an insight you had very quickly, or has it been an evolution over the years with your own relationship? Has it, and does it ever stop? Are you still getting insights about your relationship?
Well, it's more like, it's interesting because once our relationship healed, once it got on a good footing, I stopped thinking about it. We just have a relationship, it's great. It just works and it's simple. It doesn't need any attention. But what I started having insights about more was about just how people are. Like, for example, I'd have people that would come in and I would help them. And I started realizing that there were quite a number of people that would come in and they were trying to use the principles to have nothing but a positive experience all the time. It's like they were phobic about having a bad experience. And I realized, me too. I'd been one of those people I was trying to manage my experience so I only had a positive experience. And one of the realizations I had was that, here's my realization. Nothing wrong in having a negative experience, big deal. Just comes and goes, so what? Why take all this time trying to figure out and manage your life such that you never have a negative experience? That's a whole lot of work and a whole lot of effort. Why not just have a bad experience and get over it? Just like, So I started having insights about how I worked and how people worked, how life worked. And that was the journey. It was a journey of how we as human beings work. And I suppose the deepest insight I had about relationships is that relationships are all in the person's head. I live my relationship with George in my mind. And if my mind changes, the relationship changes. And see, the way we used to work on relationships is there was a relationship out there that you worked on. You worked on the dialogue and the pattern and the interaction. Well, that's after the fact. The fact is, you think your relationship, then you have feeling, and then you act on those feelings. Well, you start to understand that your relationship is in your own mind. That was the deepest insight I had, and the best one. Best one. Because I was a blamer. And it stopped me blaming. And blaming doesn't feel good. And it's also it's not very empowering, blaming.
Or productive.
Or productive, yeah. Yeah, it's not productive at all. So I love that. That was probably my last insight about relationship. And that happened years ago. And that was my relationships in my own head. So George and I, we love to be together. We enjoy each other. we love spending time together. We don't, we talk about everything and anything or don't talk, And we've been together for 40 years now. And it seems like a minute. Seems like we've been together a minute. And I think maybe that feeling that we've just been together a minute has to do with we're not carrying the past. We just look to enjoy each other.
Do you think that's possible for anyone listening to this podcast, that they could have an incredible relationship lasting decades?
Absolutely. See, the thing is, here's one of my strongest suits in working with people. I really, really believe that if I could do this, anyone can. Honestly, I mean that. I mean it. If I could do it, anyone can do it. If I can change my mind and have a good relationship, anyone can. If I can have insight, anyone can have insight. I truly believe it. And my students and my clients feel that. They go, you really mean it. You mean it. You really believe I can. I go, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Because, see, I don't believe them that they can. I don't take them seriously when they say, oh, I can't. But the thing is, see, the other thing that I had to realize in working with people in relationships is I couldn't have anything on people staying together. Because sometimes people just give up. They just don't want to. They're just tired. That's fine. You don't have to give up, but you can. Or for some reason, they just don't want to. Like one time we had the couple, we really helped them. They were in the process of a divorce. We really helped them. They became friends, and they went ahead and got a divorce. I don't know why, but they did. And they stayed friends, but they just didn't want to be married. Now, that's not my business. See, whether people stay together or not. My business is helping them see how to have a good relationship and enjoy the other person. And then they can do what they want, stay together, not stay together. And that's important, that you aren't trying to steer them. But no, I really believe that people can change. From the deepest part of my soul, I believe people can change through insight. And I also believe that people can have insight. They're not going to find their insights in their intellect, though. Intellect is what we already know. All the information in our intellect is what we already know. And we're really quick at analyzing. So if we can't analyze and come up with a solution, we're not going to find it there. We've got to go to a deeper way of thinking. We need to find an insight, because that's new thought that gives you new answers.
Well, I'm amazed that we have come to the end of our time. It has absolutely flown by, and what a lovely, hopeful message to end on. Linda, you mentioned Sydney Banks in his recordings earlier, and I just want to add to that and say there's a wonderful book which talks about the work you and George did, which is called The Relationship Handbook, which I want to give a brief shout out to. I've bought so many copies of that book for clients. I think it's incredible for anyone listening to this that wants to understand more about relationships. I'd highly recommend that book.
Well, you know what that book is? That book is the story of our relationship. After we met Sid, that's what we went through as a couple. So it's our story.
and it's incredibly transformative for people that I've worked with and people in my own family as well as myself. It was great book, so I highly recommend people purchase that from all good bookshops, I'm sure. But if anyone wants to further get in touch with you, if there's anyone who wants to teach this, because I know you work with a lot of practitioners, how might they do that?
Well, they can call Terry at 360-466-5200. And she's our office manager, and or our practice manager. And that's 360-466-5200. Or go online, PranskeyAndAssociates.com, and find us.
I was going to say, you've got some great programs online. You've got some great products online as well. So do check them out. If anyone wants to find out more about me or watch any of these previous podcasts, you can find me on Ankush Jain, ANKUSHJAIN.co.uk. And all of these podcasts are available on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as YouTube. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, Linda, and I will see the listeners next time.
All right. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it as well.
Me too.
Bye.
Bye. This was the Relationship Series podcast. If you like this episode, please share it and leave us your feedback online. Thanks for listening.